So, what exactly is instructional design? Well, the fun thing about asking this question is that if you go ask 10 different instructional designers, you're bound to end up with 11 different answers. So in this video, I'm going to make it simple for you. So stick around. Hey there folks, Tim Slade here from the eLearning Designers Academy. When I first fell into the world of training and learning and development and e-learning and of course, instructional design, I had little clue about much of anything. And, as many of you know, I used to catch shoplifters for a living before someone suggested I apply for this training coordinator role to teach others how to catch shoplifters. And, at the time, I truly believed my job as a training coordinator was very different from others within the organization who had the title of instructional designer. Now, of course, as I look back on all of that, although I was called a training coordinator, and although most of my work focused on e-learning development, at the core of it all, I was actually an instructional designer doing instructional design work. I just didn't know it, and I just wasn't called it. And, that's the fun thing about job titles in our industry, which is a totally separate video for a separate day. But, if you're new to the world of instructional design or e-learning or learning and development in general, do you really know what instructional design is? Well, here, I'll put it simply. Instructional design is the process of applying solid learning theories in the design and development of effective and engaging training experiences or resources. And that's about it. But I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, gosh, with everyone out there having a different opinion about instructional design, it really can't be that simple, right? Well, I'm here to tell you that, yes, it is that simple. But you see, if there's one thing that I know to be true about our industry, it's that we love to overcomplicate everything. And as I mentioned at the top of the video, if you were to ask 10 different instructional designers to define what instructional design means, you'd end up with 11 different answers that may or may not look or sound anything like the definition I just gave you. And how frustrating is that? And why are there so many different answers and opinions about what should be a seemingly simple question? Well, the truth is it comes down to how you look at it. You see, most professionals in our industry view instructional design from one of two angles, the theory and the process. On one hand, we have the theory folks who tend to view instructional design as purely a set of theories and ideas about how people learn and how to design engaging and effective learning experiences. And then on the other hand, we have the process folks who typically view instructional design as a set of practices and processes for developing engaging and effective training experiences. Now, you may not think there's a lot of differences between those two things I just described to you, but if you were carefully listening, you might have noticed that I was very intentional with my words. You see, when we talk about what instructional design is, there's often a duality between learning and training, between design and development, and between the theories of instructional design and the practical application of instructional design. And you know what? The truth is, instructional design is a combination of both of these things, theory and process. And in fact, it would be my opinion and experience that you really can't have one without the other. The theories of instructional design are only as good as they're practically applied in the real world and vice versa. But where does this divide come from? Well, it would be my opinion and experience that it stems from what your background is and how you got into the world of instructional design in the first place. You see, typically those who define instructional design primarily from a theory standpoint tend to be formally educated in learning theory and instructional design, whereas those who define and view instructional design from a process standpoint tend to be those who fell into it by accident, like I did years ago, and worked their way into the world of instructional design. It's kind of like the difference between being book smart versus street smart. Individually, being either one by itself has its advantages and disadvantages. But when you can be both book smart and street smart at the same time and know when to use each, that's when you know you've really got it. So let's take a look at each of these a little deeper. When we talk about instructional design from a theory standpoint, that's where we start focusing on the science of how people learn and how we can design experiences that are optimized for the learning process. And of course, depending on who your learners might be, this is where we get into pedagogy versus andragogy, how to apply Malcolm Knowles' principles of adult learning and Merrill's principles of instruction, as well as understanding John Sweller's cognitive load theory. And, when we talk about the theories of instructional design, we look at these from a modality agnostic standpoint. And what that means is that we as instructional designers apply these theories regardless of how the training is actually delivered, whether it's a synchronous training experience like an instructor-led workshop, an asynchronous experience like a self-paced e-learning course, or anything else in between. So that's a very high-level overview of the theory side of instructional design. Let's now take a look at the process side of instructional design. Now, as I mentioned earlier, understanding the theory of instructional design is only half of what it actually means to be an instructional designer. We also need to understand the process in which it's applied at a practical level. And this is where we come down out of the clouds of the theory and get into the weeds and the nitty-gritty of actually doing the work of instructional design and the work of actually developing a learning and training solution. And this includes conducting a needs analysis to validate the cause of a performance issue, determining whether or not that issue can be fixed with training, working with stakeholders and subject matter experts to scope and manage the project, creating design documents, drafting storyboards, and developing the actual training materials, whether it's as simple as a job aid or as complex as an interactive e-learning course. It also means implementing the training solution, perhaps by distributing it through a learning management system, and of course, assessing and evaluating the effectiveness of the training. And as I talk about the process side of instructional design, this is where we start using models like ADDIE or SAM to help us organize and execute all of these steps in a repeatable way. Now, unlike the theories of instructional design, which are modality agnostic, when it comes to the process and the practical application of instructional design, we tend to be more modality specific. And what that means is that, at a certain point in the process, you consider all of the variables you're working with in regards to your learners, the learning environment, the project, and the content of what you're teaching to determine the best method for developing and delivering that training experience. Again, whether it's just a job aid or a large-scale blended solution. So that's what instructional design is. It's about designing and developing engaging and effective training experiences. And to do that, it requires an understanding and application of good learning theory, and along with an understanding and execution of good processes. And depending on the context in which those theories and processes are being applied, you'll be seeking different outcomes. For example, in a workplace setting, instructional design might be applied to help employees perform their jobs better so that the organization can achieve its business goals. Whereas in an educational setting, instructional design might be applied to increase the retention of knowledge to achieve a student's educational goals. So the next time you talk to someone about what instructional design is, or if you get asked what instructional design is, or if you ask someone else what instructional design is, you're bound to hear people talk about it from a theory standpoint or a process standpoint. And they'll talk about it from the context in which those theories and processes are being applied. But it's your job to remember that instructional design is a combination of theories and processes, and instructional design is contextual to the situation, organization, or setting in which it's being used. And that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to understanding instructional design and what it is that instructional designers do. So if you'd like to learn more, check out the links down in the description. So with that said, I want to know what you think. How do you define instructional design? Share your thoughts by commenting below. As always, I want to thank you so much for watching. If you haven't done so already, make sure to click that like, subscribe, and that bell button to get alerted the next time I publish a video just like this one. And of course, make sure to join us inside the e-learning designers community with the link down in the comments to connect and learn from others who are also working to grow their instructional design and e-learning careers by focusing on skills first. All right. Otherwise, my name is Tim Slade, and until next time, I'll see you around.